Greetings. Today is Transfiguration Sunday. Transfiguration Sunday is a very, very hard one to explain, sort of like trying to explain the Trinity as three persons in one God. What the heck does that even mean? And even more importantly, how does it pertain to our faith life? You must know that these are only rhetorical questions for which I have no answers, sorry. But I believe that the Transfiguration is much more tangible and enriching than trying to explain the Trinity. The first Transfiguration is in the book of Exodus today. It has Cecil B. DeMille written all over it and possibly should have been a sequel on its own right to the Ten Commandments. That was the one that I watched with my mother, with Pharaoh's armies, chariots, horsemen alike, drowning spectacularly after the sea came flooding back in. Some of us may even remember watching it with Charlton Heston playing Moses. It came out in 1956, so my mother took me, age 10, to see it. Sounded pretty boring to me, but as soon as the opening scene came on, I was swept up in this timeless and also timely story that has held center stage for millennia. Let me read it now while you can meditate on that painting of Moses. Exodus 34:29 to 35. Moses came down from Mount Sinai. As he came down from the mountain with the two tablets of the covenant in his hand, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, the skin of his face was shining, and they were afraid to come near him. Justifiably so, it was a sign. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses spoke directly with them. Afterwards, all the Israelites came near, and he gave them in the commandment that had been spoken with him on Mount Sinai. When Moses had finished speaking with him, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what had been commanded, the Israelites would see the face of Moses, that the skin of his face was shining, and Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went back to speak with God. Then in the Synoptic Gospels we have an upgrade. We now go to Transfiguration 2.0. This time the Transfiguration happens when Jesus takes his three closest disciples to the top of a mountain. Probably a little bit dramatic than the one in the movie. Here you can see them. The passages from Luke 9:28 to 36 and 37 to 43a. Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and went up to the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighted down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not even knowing what he had said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things that they had seen. Not quite as dramatic as the Cecil B. DeMille version, but the same theme. God is too distant and far and exalted for just anyone to have a conversation with, let alone see. It was only his 3 closest disciples that saw the vision, and they were to tell no one. So ends Transfiguration 2.0 version. And of course Paul, the self-appointed disciple who had never even met the earthly Jesus, adds his own 2 cents in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 12 to 4, verse 2. He says, "Since then we have such hope, we act with great boldness, not like Moses, who put a veil over his face to keep the people of Israel from gazing at the end of the glory that was being set aside. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed, and all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit." Wow! At last, centuries after Moses, decades after Jesus was crucified, Paul boldly claims that the followers of Jesus can and do see the glory of the Lord also. This wraps up Transfiguration 3.0. Now to the most exciting, newest upgrade of Transfiguration, Transfiguration 4.0. Meet Sophie, short for Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, the spirit blowing among us. Every month, our regional clergy group assembles for a meeting where we get to share our own personal stories of faith, our failures, our successes, our hopes. Last week, one of the clergy women needed to bring her daughter Sophie, 3 or 4, to the meeting when the babysitting arrangement had fallen through at the last moment. Considering the meeting was very long, well over the allotted 2 hours, Sophie was pretty much on her own for that time, coloring on a drawing of Cinderella and wandering around randomly with an occasional sit down on her mom for comfort. It was a bit distracting, but most of us had had children, even grandchildren, so we are not particularly bothered by this kind of behavior. We just ignored her and went about with our serious business. As I had been watching Sophie for hours on the outside of our tight-knit circle, the words of Jesus inspired me. We had been in a similar situation, and all the disciples could do to ignore them or chastise their parents. But Jesus said, "Let the children come to me. Do not prevent them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Then he embraced the children and blessed them, placing his hands upon them. Mark 10:14. Then when the last adult had checked in, I turned to look down at Sophie on my left and asked her if she would be willing to let us all see her artwork. Just at this point of her life, a series of random lines in different colors that I think my cat could have done as well with. Immediately her face lit up and she handed me the obviously unfinished drawing. I looked at it and smiled, telling her how beautiful it was. Then the unfinished drawing was passed reverently, like the holy relic that it was, from hand to hand. Each one looking admiringly at the scribble, smiling very widely towards her, complimenting her, some giving her the thumbs up. At the end, she was beaming with pride, her presents and her gifts fully acknowledged. Just like her unfinished drawing of Cinderella before the magic wand and the glass slipper, she was seen in her fullness, wonderfully made in the image of God, just as each of us was as we held her drawing reverently. The Transfiguration event reminded me of an encounter I recently had with a child of an Oregon friend when I visited a couple of months ago. I am usually good with children, but I had always felt a barrier with Maggie. Somehow she seemed different, a bit intimidating, unknown and unknowable, so I managed to just focus on the adults, while sort of hoping she would just go back to her room. There were 4 of us adults at the reunion, longtime friends from Unity Church. As we sat down to lunch and to catch up on years absent, the child sat down with us. Maggie had become Ace, and they referred to themselves as they, them, their. I was a bit familiar with this since many of us from the LGBT community referred to our same-sex partner as their, so as not to out ourselves. But there they sat, silent, watching us. At a break at the table, I decided to engage them directly. Soon they were showing me their artwork. Her father's a gifted artist, talking about their large flock of pet chickens, and we connected, my using the proper pronouns, mostly, like a pro. I even asked them why they decided to change their name to Ace. When a trans person visited their class, a number of students decided to make the switch in solidarity. Later, when I was talking with their father, I made the mistake of saying, "Your daughter." He looked me sternly in the eye and said, "I do not have a daughter." Well, I guess more practice is in order. Then after they took us all out to the large enclosure to show off several of their prized specimens and hand them to us, we all went back inside to say goodbye. As the adults deeply embraced one another, not knowing when we would see one another again. But I really didn't know anything about Ace's boundaries. I looked across the small circle and asked them directly, "Do you hug?" Instead of answering me, they went around their parents, came up to me, and we shoulder bumped. Transfiguration 4.0 complete. And as a subtle gift from Spirit, their name, Ace. To be fair, I looked up its etymology as well as that of Sophia, which I'd already known. I thought it would just say like a card, a playing card, but it actually means whole or reunited, not divided. So it seems that when Ace decided to go to them, they, their, that choice means that they were no longer going to be bound up by the binary system, such as good or bad, black or white, but chose to see the entire world in all its multicolored glory. I could find no pictures of them on their webpage, but I found a picture of a rooster, a cock ready to crow, to issue in the new Transfiguration Sunday today. I hope you hear its voice and answer. Blessings.